Today we're going to take a look at the Tigris and Euphrates rivers as part of a larger standard including many of the early river valley civilizations. We're going to take a look at the written language, the government, trade systems, architecture, social order, and religion. So here we go. Written language in the Tigris and Euphrates, or T&E as we'll refer to it for the rest of this video, started off with symbols and markings on walls and caves. They moved from symbols depicting nouns to pictograms and symbols for verbs and adjectives. Pictures began representing sounds and homonyms, and the explosion of the written language made a way for legal contracts, hymns, prayers, and even letters towards one another. By 2400 BCE, we see children at scribal schools writing on clay tablets, learning vocab in Sumerian, which was the legal script, but they also learned Akkadian, which was a more commoner's language. By 1100 BCE, the Israelites began to document their history in written form, which was Hebrew. They began to write psalms and songs. Darius had an inscription carved in a mountainside in multiple languages to help later historians to compare and contrast between multiple languages. Alexander the Great established Greek as the official language, and so therefore from carvings to pictures to simple then complex words, the written language developed into a form we are more familiar with today. So early people groups didn't have kings. But around approximately 2900 BCE, kings began to rule the southern parts of the region. They were given the title of Lugal, which literally means big man. In 2100 BCE, we see the start of the Sumerian kings list. They were independent governments, yet they shared a common language and religions. Around the same time, King Sargon came to power and created the first great empire in history. Sargon's messengers were the first diplomats, communicating between lands. Around 2094 BCE, a new king, King Shulgi, appeared. He could read and write, unlike most other kings. He made sure there was a concise record that was kept dealing with taxes, payments, and donation records. He was concerned for the poor and the weak people. Shulgi instituted written laws covering everything from assault to vigilantism. Hammurabi was the sixth king of the first dynasty, starting his reign around 1792 BCE. Hammurabi wiped all debt and became a hero to the people. See, his laws covered vast court issues from divorce to property disputes. He instituted an eye for an eye justice system. He was trying to bring respect to the courts. He brought the development of contracts to a new level. The five great power lands considered themselves brothers and traded gifts to keep peace. Then we see a group of people calling themselves the Israelites begin to surface. They organized into 12 tribes, and initially they had no leaders except during battles. The Israelites soon decided to elect a king named Saul. Then they elected David, and then eventually Solomon. And in 922 BCE, Israel separated into Judah, which took the lands to the south, and Israel, which took the lands to the north. They had separate kings. Now there were some other formidable kings of this time, but the development of a governmental system was established and copied to some degree in many lands of the day. Early people realized that if they had something others wanted, they could trade for it. They just had to get together. King Sargon established ship trading far into the Arabian Sea. And King Shulgi, he encouraged vast trade by setting a standard of weights and measures. Now everyone is playing by the same rules. However, few merchants traveled in trade themselves due to the inherent dangers of the day. Instead, they used trading agents. One of the things we began to see was farmers market style gatherings, and that began to become more and more prevalent throughout the day. And around 1100 BCE, distant trading almost ceased because there was no great power in the east. But King Solomon developed the trading routes with the Phoenicians along the Mediterranean coast. So early people groups built homes from earth and clay. As they became more affluent, southern Sumerian cities began to build high walls and fortified gates. They built their homes with outward strong walls for protection and developed systems within their homes for hygiene. It was common to find a whole city block occupied by close relatives and immediate families. This resembled the generational families we see in many cultures today. Schools had benches, houses had flushing toilets, art-adorned walls, and thrones. Well, they were elaborate. Babylon was a very elaborate city. The Euphrates River flowed right through the middle. See, Babylon covered 3 square miles compared to Jerusalem, which was only 700 yards. The Greeks built elaborate cities but developed their own style and was soon to be seen throughout the whole land. People began to believe that punishment and blessing came from the gods. Social statuses were sometimes determined by their religiosity. The story of Gilgamesh brought about ideas about life. And then we see temple workers passing down the trade from generation to generation. Father to son to grandson, all working in the temple, doing the same thing. There were distinctions between what man's work and woman's work should be. Scribal schools was only for wealthy kids, and few females were in those schools. Kings could choose polygamy or multiple wives, but common folk should only have one wife. In religion, we're going to mainly focus on Judaism, which is the arrival of the Israelites when they moved into the Levant. Some people refer to the Levant as the biblical promised land. Judaism was the worship of the God of Israel. It was a monotheistic religion where one God you serve. God created the world, desires for his creation to love him back. That was what they believed. Judaism became more known due to the Israelites' desire to document their history. They took these rivers and they built canals and levees. They raised the banks to keep rivers flowing near settlements. Armies marched along the rivers for direction, survival, and protection. Part of the Levant was thought to be lush for farming due to the proximity of the Mediterranean Sea. Babylon used the Euphrates, which flowed right through the middle of their city, to establish trade and travel. The 3 rules for survival say that you can live 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. You see, air was everywhere, and they grew, traded, and hunted for the food they ate, but water. They had to be near water. Some of the influences that we still see today are things like the potter's wheel, which people still use for making pots. And pots are used to store and carry things just like they were back then. We see the plow, which is used to prepare lands for crops. That's what they used it for back then. We see festivals and holy days. We still see this idea of generational living. We see the courts of justice, legal documents, and written law. And that's just some of the enduring influences we see today. So that's it for Fast Track Through History. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. See you soon.